Some work I did a few years ago on dowsing, and really the thing started in Sardinia with a master dowser, Mauro Arasu, who is very well known in northern Sardinia for his ability to find archaeological relics. And the reason he finds the archaeological relics is he's looking for water, and when he finds water, there's an archaeological relic on top of it, because the ancient Sardinians built their structures where there was water. Okay, well, I'm not interested in water, but I'm interested in vital energy and the association of vital energy with language. So I had a bit of a problem trying to get the original paper published, because there was a mental attitude in science that subjective language, subjective values are prejudicing reality. Now, I'm going to start by showing you the dowsing technique. The first thing I'll do is to douse the energy level in the room. Would you mind closing that door for me? And then I will douse 2 words, and you'll see what I'm doing. Okay. What is the energy room? What is the energy level in this room? 14. Now, that is about twice the neutral level.
Microphone, please.
Oh. Okay, 14 is twice the neutral level. That means this room is actually energized by your presence and your interest in the subject. And that's, I think, something that comes out when we go into this issue. Now, I said I would also douse 2 words. One is cynical, and the other is happiness. Okay, so these 2 words I'm going to do. Cynical, 3 revolutions. Okay, happiness. Revolutions. So what you're seeing is the difference between a positive emotion and a negative emotion. The negative emotion reduces your aura, and the positive emotion increases it. Okay? So I'm struck by how different words have different levels of vital energy, which may be measured by dowsing. And I'd like to say something about languages, and in particular about the restricted level of vital energy in the words commonly used in science. Vital energy can be equated with ki, prana, or orgone, and in dowsing we attempt to measure its intensity. Now, I'm going to try and use this presentation as an illustration of 2 methods of measuring vital energy. Here is one of my inspirations, C.G. Jung, The Power of Words and the Independence of the Conscious and Subconscious Minds. These are the 2 issues that I'm really looking at. And Jung said, repressions occur each time a stimulus word touches upon a psychic lesion or conflict. He also said, daily experience taught me what intense resistance the unconscious opposes to the tendencies of the conscious mind. In other words, we have 2 mental structures in ourselves that are not always in agreement. The main reason, I believe, why scientists lack enthusiasm for dowsing seems to be that science considers human interventions in the physical process as compromising their objectivity. Jim Lyons, a dowser who's also a physicist, said, What cannot be measured by an instrument is deemed to have no value. Therefore, all conscious processes exist outside the current reductionist paradigm of science. Well, we don't agree with that, but that is a fairly common point of view. Science also assumes that all individuals are single-minded in the sense that while we're all searching for objectivity, science assumes that an individual's thoughts are conscious and hence subject to bias. The critics of Dowsing also assume that the conscious mind is responsible for dowsed outputs, which is not the case. And the contrast between subjectivity and objectivity is more evident if an individual's nervous system contains more than one thinking center. And that is why I involved the Huna philosophy in what I'm describing now. So the Huna philosophy was interesting to me because of my background in shamanism, because it was one of the more sophisticated shamanic belief systems, and it was described in a lot of detail by Max Freedom Long. And his point of view was that in Huna practice, subconscious and subconscious minds were treated as separate psychic entities, although resident in the same body. A third entity, they believed, was the superconscious or higher self, and often this would remain outside the physical body but had a supervisory role. So a formal deity was not often considered, and so the idea was that we have to solve our own problems between the three of us. In other words, the three minds associated with each human being. When activated, the higher self generates a strong intuition, often leading to paradigm changes. It intervenes in emergencies, emotional emergencies or intellectual emergencies, or it forecasts events, especially if mana is provided from the supplicant's open hands. This is what is intended. We provide mana to the higher self, and the higher self responds by sending information down. Now, in this cartoon to the left here, you get some elements of what I tried to show. The conscious mind is situated above, let us say above, the subconscious, and there is this Janus figure, which is a male-female, they explain is a male-female loving supervisory figure in the spiritual world that occasionally visits when there is a crisis. Now, if there is information being asked in the spiritual area, the information has to pass through the subconscious to come to the conscious self. There is no route between the conscious mind and the superconscious. So all of the information that we are working on, and actually this includes to a large extent the data we are getting from outside the body, is funneled in through subconscious structures. So this, I think, gives you a point of view, allowing you to think of dowsing in this fashion, and there is some modern research that appears to substantiate some of this. That the neurophysiologists and neurologists I'm mentioning here are of the opinion that the subconscious is largely separate from the conscious mind, and it has three main functions. The first is information storage, maintenance of the autonomic nervous system, and analysis. And these functions are largely carried out beyond the areas of awareness of the conscious mind. So a lot of things are going on in the subconscious all the time that we are not aware of. Now, the website that I found the other day specified that 88% of the neurons in the brain are accessed by the subconscious, while the conscious mind in the prefrontal cortex uses only 12% of the brain's neurons, which is a remarkably small amount of our intellectual activity going on in the conscious mind. On the subconscious, the comment was that sometimes its goals are in line with our conscious intentions and sometimes they're not. That's what I was saying earlier. A code of communication between the subconscious and conscious mind may use the involuntary muscles, but also the arm and hand muscles when dowsing. So it seems useful to learn the views of the subconscious, and I'm taking the view that what I'm doing as a conscious mind is interviewing the subconscious. That's why I'm saying that this is an objective source of information, because it's another person that I'm interviewing. I'm not giving you my opinion, I'm giving you my subconscious's opinion. So dowsing offers an opportunity that we can use. Now, a review in the New Scientist article recently described how magnetic resonance imaging detected stirrings in the prefrontal cortex up to 10 seconds before the subject was aware of making a conscious decision. So a lot of the accomplishment of activities is done in the subconscious, and we assume when we're aware of it that we decided to do something, when in fact it's been decided by another brain in some time earlier. So the scientists conclude that the subconscious mind is often in charge, and they reckon that the mulling over of problems by the subconscious can explain those aha moments when the answer to a problem comes from nowhere. But according to Huna, this could also be a characteristic of superconscious impulse, not just of subconscious impulse. So the other interesting aspect is magnetic resonance imaging has mapped the words in the brain and found they are clustered in clusters located spatially similar to similar words. Pogue said, using MRI scanners, the same parts of the brain light up when we think of certain nouns, and storage sites for words or names are clustered in logical groups. Often, for example, names of animals fall close to one another and together with vehicles, perhaps because both are capable of movement. I.e., the brain organizes verbal information spatially, grouping words with similar units of vocabulary. They didn't present any information on energy. Now here, this is a map of it presented by Huth and Company, showing the distribution of word locations found by magnetic resonance imaging. For example, we have here the word plant, organism, person, geological formation, location, matter, building, room, etc. So all of these words tend to occur in specific sites, and they said that to a certain extent different individuals have similar distribution patterns. Now this puts the significance of this research for me is that dowsing for my study on dowsing is that it provides the idea that individual words are discrete elements stored in the brain and used for communication. They're not imaginary things, they are actually in the brain and being used. Looking at the other implications of Huna's ideas on the superconscious, it only intervenes in critical or inspired moments. It, in a sense, is likely to be involved with the creative impulse, both in science and arts, i.e. It provides strong intuition, possibly because it has available to it extracorporeal sources of information, such as the implicate order. Now, the one idea could be that the jhanas nature of the higher self described by Huna, brings to mind the difference between the left and right hemisphere. This is the idea here that this upper entity is somehow or other an integration of the two hemispheres of the brain. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that, but an example of how high levels of vital energy are necessary for creativity was specified by Bohm and Pete in their book Science, Order and Creativity, when they asserted that creative perception involves a state of intense passion and high energy that dissolves the rigidly held assumptions in the infrastructure of commonly accepted knowledge. And that seems to me to imply that the integration of the thinking processes for the two hemispheres. So I'm going back to words again, and there's a very ancient point of view about the power of words. The one in the beginning was the word from the Bible, and the fact that there is no doubt that vital energy is intrinsic to the words we use, but for pre-literate societies this was even more true than today. And now we're under global materialism, where superlatives have been abused by the advertising industry, which has actually deteriorated the value of the words that we use. But for example, Edmund Carpenter quotes an Inuit or Eskimo or Pingalink who said, "We will fear to use words because he was in awe of their power to bring the universe itself into existence." This is a pre-Christian point of view, nothing to do with the Bible. So this was a very common thing. Then there's a somewhat more amusing example where Robert Graves wrote that in pre-Christian Ireland, if a man insulted an Irish court poet, the latter would compose a satire about the person who did it and bring out black blotches on his face and turn his bowels to water. Well, I don't think that's very likely to happen now with a satire, but it's an interesting example. So, and sacred words are often names. Some Jewish people call God Hashem, which is Hebrew for the name, and Yahweh is a name for the Almighty, which by the very strongly religious Jewish people can only be spoken by the high priest. Now, I did a dowsing in a very sacrilegious way for the names of Jesus, Buddha and Muhammad, and I got very high scores for all of them, even though I'm not a believer. Now, this itself makes me think that the information given by this dowsing came from the superconscious and was stored somewhere, and it was not my personal opinion, and I have no particular enthusiasm for any religion at the moment. So the idea is that this reading was from the superconscious, and I have not repeated it, and I don't intend to repeat it because it's not a thing that I want to play with. But when I was starting to do this work, I was very ambitious to find out what would happen if I dowsed certain words. So the interpretation of reality the subconscious provides is only indirectly available to the conscious mind, and outputs must be deduced from the behavior of the dowsing wand and its intensity, which is the number of rotations in this case. So the number of rotations provides an estimate of vital energy. When the wand has reached the number of rotations qualified by the question, it is blocked by the subconscious. So you rotate it manually, but when you reach the end, you cannot rotate it anymore. All the force you put in will not rotate it anymore. That's the point you reach, and it's a very definitive point. So a question from the conscious mind is answered here. This is my diagram of where I see this. first of all, this conscious mind requests a reading. This goes to the subconscious, which identifies relevant information if it has them, and it then controls the 1 revolutions, which are the number of revolutions is related to the intensity of the information. This is seen by the conscious mind, which, although it has in its range of activity, in its self at the time, the question, what is the energy? That is all it has. It doesn't reflect on the word or the concept. It simply says, what is the energy of? And the word is given. Sometimes it's possible that the subconscious, the superconscious would also provide an input, and that would go through the subconscious to the one. So, and you would not be able to tell which it is that is doing this, except by the context of what you are looking at. So the range of values you get go from negative emotions, which will have low readings from, let's say, less than 6 to 8, which is the neutral area. And this neutral area, I've come to call it the band of rationality, because there is less emotional input there, and you can discuss things in a rational way. But if you're in this area and you're in the higher area, which goes up to spiritual concepts, you will not be able to discuss things rationally, because you will be feeling an emotional input. So that's, I think, one of the interesting things about this study. There should be an interest in the methods used by our distant ancestors to access paranormal realms. I feel that we have neglected this aspect, and in shamanism there is quite a lot of evidence that our distant ancestors had not only equal mental resources to us, that were not occupied by the wonders of modern civilization, the internet, printed words, etc., but were presumably focused on man and on superconscious inputs received from the universe. It seems reasonable, therefore, to assume that ancients had better opportunities than us to sense paranormal phenomena. So what sensory perceptions might our conscious mind have lost or been neglecting? This is an attempt to interpret what's going on, and there's quite a number of people who have published on related issues that I'm not mentioning here. It assumes that our subconscious has access through, let's say, Gaia's energy field, to the superconscious and implicate order through psi inputs, and so the subconscious has information. It may receive it through the chakras and the aura, and we in the conscious mind, in the conscious realm, get information from our ordinary senses. But here there's a perceptual filter, which is our model that we were taught at school or at home of what the actual world is. And so many of the perceptions of key energy, for example, would be eliminated, although our subconscious will in fact be aware of them. I think that this could very well be an example of a conscious exclusion of a lot of information, and that by changing our axioms of perception, we may actually regain the information and capabilities we had before. Now, I'm going to talk about, somebody also talked about this yesterday, there's another method of sense that I call hand sensing, and this is also a very good thing, and I really recommend people to learn how to do this. I'm willing to show people after lunch if they're interested, because here in the building there is a tremendous series of cloisters, and in the cloisters, I went yesterday and I went 4 years ago when I was here, there are places where there is high energy and very low energy. So one can detect using this method. So the idea is that the aura expands when you have a high energy stimulus, and it contracts when you have a low energy stimulus, so that when the two auras of the hands, which are the most sensitive part of the body, when these auras touch, you will sense the level of energy. We are now about here, about almost a meter. That's nearly 3 times the neutral level. So we are actually focusing on this concept. So I learned this method from the pranic healing school, where it is used for estimating the state of the aura and the chakras. And I found that the results of doing this more or less correspond to the dowsing results. So I've done parallel dowsing and hand sensing results, and they're pretty much the same. Here's an example that this actually will measure it will measure vital energy in nature. And here, for example, there was a waterfall that entered a fissure between 2 geological masses that were quite distinct. And this bridge was over the top of the waterfall, and you can see I was getting quite a high reading for that. Now, going back to words again, that was a digression, but it is remarkable that given a single, this is what I'm trying to say here, is this is the way we use language influences our perception in a very negative way in many cases. So that we have a simple axiom that the text of a one-dimensional sequence of symbols can be used to describe events in 3 spatial dimensions and specifies the flow of time. In other words, our way of communicating that is through a one-dimensional series of symbols. And so it's deduced, reality is deduced from a one-dimensional flow of symbols, which is not a very convincing way of doing things. So there is the subconscious assumptions built into our mode of communication fix our ideas on the physical universe. Now, Worf, who is a very famous linguist, concluded that the linear sequence of words in time is the basis for the axiom of physics that action precedes reaction, i.e. syntropy is verbally improbable given our grammatic assumptions. Okay, it's verbally improbable. It doesn't have anything to do with its probability as a reality. In fact, he suggested that quantum theory, and presumably syntropy, would be easier to understand for the Hopi people, whose language assumes that action and reaction are instantaneous, not sequential. So that's an interesting observation, is that our language forces us into a theory of physics that eliminates syntropy. And I think you might want to use that idea. So I first began dowsing physical objects that I assumed to be symbols of psychic energy. And then I wondered if these objects, when I was dowsing the object or the name of the object. And for example, I got a low reading for a brass hand of Fatima, a Hawaiian crucible, and a kneeling figure from Mexico in jade. Don't ask me why. And I got a neutral for a crystal ball, a priest Hispanic whetstone. And then I went into higher areas. There was amber, a bull roarer from Aboriginal Australia, a picture of a Chinese Qigong master, a Chinese jade carving, a bone whistle, American Indian artifact, an obsidian cube from Mexico, and the highest ones were 2 drums, one with a bare face that I used for voyaging, and a big drum from Brazil. So these 2 scored extremely high values. Now, my first investigation was on the vital energy of the emotions, as studied by Schumacher and Kreitz, they categorized emotions into 6 groups: love, joy, surprise, and in each group there were a number of emotions. So I dowsed these emotions, and then I used cluster analysis to see how they fell out. And you can see that at the top, the 2 emotions, amusement, what is that? Amusement and joy, compassion, all occurred with a similar thing. And then there was surprise, astonishment, and then happiness, pride and relief were all similar. Lust and longing were more or less similar. Adoration, contentment and ecstasy occurred on more or less the same score. Jealousy, contempt, bitterness, frustration, anger, hurt and envy, and then shame and agony and embarrassment, horror and anxiety, loneliness, depression, outrage, guilt, sadness, regret, disappointment, and then at the bottom the highest scores were hope and love. So you can see that there seemed to be some kind of logic to the fact that I feel that those linkages are very, very real, and represent what I'm thinking. No, what am I doing? I'm using the wrong button here.
5 minutes.
Yeah?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
At the end of the...
5 minutes.
Well, I'm sorry. I can't finish this then, because I'm out of I'm 2/3 of the way through, so I'll just have to go to the bit that the bit that I was going to deal with was to point out that I had also found that dowsing of phrases was also a possibility. And for example, the phrase, "it is possible to lie and even to murder for the truth," scored 1. "Evil finds work for idle hands to do," scored 2. And down at the top end, "as I walk through the wilderness of this world," scored fairly high. What do we mean by the phrase "I understand" was high. And now what I was going to do was to finish this presentation with a small experiment in which I'd ask you to read the following phrases and see your reaction to them. Vital force pervades the cosmos. It permeates all things animate and inanimate. Love is the primary cosmic fact. The heart has its reasons. If we activate the silent areas of consciousness, we achieve total awareness. The present seems a moving stillness. I was taught by non-human entities who reside in higher dimensions. I believe I am eternal. Death of the mind is an absurdity. Physical reality recedes as man's symbolic activity advances. Now, these are all high-scoring phrases. So we're here. Okay, I don't know whether any of you can sense that we're in a high-energy field, but we are certainly in a high-energy field now. That's a very high score for a field. So that's basically...
Microphone. Microphone.
That's a very high score for a field. Let me just go down If I can find the button. So these are the conclusions that come from my study. The fundamental clues to progress in paranormal studies should come from the subconscious. Science uses language devoid of emotion to avoid prejudice. This makes it difficult for science to study phenomena with high levels of vital energy, which are in some sense spiritual. Low-scoring sentiments, e.g. criticism and doubt, and science strategy at disproving hypotheses to determine the truth may lead to difficulties when investigating high-energy concepts. The higher emotions correspond to high levels of ki and may be associated with interventions by the superconscious. The easiest way to determine the level of vital energy you are subject to is to learn to measure the expansion or contraction of your active aura, which is what I've been trying to show you. Thank you.
I wonder if you have a definition of good emotion.
Good emotion?
Yes, you mentioned that.
I think you could see that the higher emotions come, like you can see that the higher emotions are associated with, the higher emotions are associated with high scores from the rotation of the dowsing law. So if you get above 7 or 8, you start to get into low emotions which are not very strong, and if you get up further, you get to higher emotions, and then above that, you go into an area which is actually spiritual. It doesn't have to be an emotion at all, but it is a spiritual concept, like the words, the phrases that I read to you at the end. Those are higher emotional phrases. They're not emotional, they're spiritual phrases. So there is an element of spirituality that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with religion. These are just phrases that have an important effect on our subconscious.
But is there another description that doesn't require dowsing?
Well, you can do it like this. You say, what is spirituality? Well, it's like that, you know. Spirituality is high scoring thinking. Now, if you learn to do that, you don't need a dictionary, and you can do it by your own instincts. Yes?
I just wanted to say that in the work that I do, which is primarily somatically based, that as soon as we hit any kind of, in quotes, good words, Jackie, or spiritual concepts, the room will start to get cooler because spiritual energy is cool, we've discovered. And if it's really hot, it'll feel as though you just walked into a walk-in freezer. It'll get that cold, that fast. And then we all know, without a doubt, what we've just been evoking and encountering. And when we do physical healing, it gets warmer. It's a warm energy. And just as yesterday, as Antonella felt the heat in her heart, then there was an actual physical shift that was going on. And so that's comparable to what John's saying. It's an immediate thing that cannot be ignored. You can't not acknowledge it. Some people find they can't do this very well, but when that room gets cold as ice, there's no doubt.
Yes.
How does your own personal energy level factor in when you measure the energy of the room? If you are very low energy yourself and the room energy is high, what are you actually measuring?
Well, I think you're right in implying that my energy level is subordinate in a way to the energy level of the room, or it is related to it, in the sense that I think I can detect that there's an element of energy in this room that is separate from mine, but it could very well be that I'm influencing it by my own personal energy, and so I think it's a question that should be answered by yourselves in the sense that you should know what the energy of the room is by doing what I was showing you. And then you would have had an answer that didn't depend on me. And that, I think, is the correct answer to the question. Thank you.